Hi, my name is Rashida Jackson, and this is my critical race theory presentation. To the first question, how does it help for me to examine and understand my own racial identity development? One of the events that I remember that first acknowledged my racial and ethnic identity was moving from San Francisco to Stockton. It was a huge change in my friends and my neighborhood. I now lived in a very suburban town versus being in the city, being able to move freely on the bus or on the muni, where I did not have those luxuries living in Stockton. The difference, though, some of the other differences was that the racial makeup of Stockton was very, very diverse, is very diverse. And I was exposed to new ethnicities such as the Southeast Asians and Polynesians that I never experienced in the city. I also realized after leaving the city how much of it at an economic disadvantage I was. In the city, we had to live in an apartment, which was very expensive, versus now moving to Stockton, living in a house. What informed me of my racial identity development? My family played a huge part. Always being surrounded by my family who looked like me. Uh, I always had friends that looked like me. Visited my extended family in other parts of the country that looked like me. And also, music is a huge part of the African American experience. And discovering the revolutionary sounds of the 60s that always played in my house alongside the neo soul movement that was happening in my 20s was very profound for me and really showed different layers to what it was to be a Black person in America. The role of race in framing my racial identity. It plays a significant part in my racial identity. As I am a Black woman, it is the first thing people see about me. My mother and my extended family have always made me aware of the many negative stereotypes that have been bestowed upon me just for being a Black woman, and to always resist the urge to fall into those stereotypical traps. I have learned how to always be aware of compromising situations and how to navigate problematic racist or sexist behavior, especially in the workplace and in my personal life. And luckily, I have not had any major issues in either setting in regards to race or sexism. When did I first become aware of my racial self and how was it manifested? I think it goes back to my family. I've always been aware that I'm a Black woman, a Black child, a Black girl, and that the people around me and my family um, look like me, and that we have our own history within America that also is important to know. And so, as a child, I have constantly, it's been reinforced constantly of who I am and what my place is in American society and even the world. And that took not only stories from my family, but actually traveling the world because the Black experience outside of America is very different. So, a time that I experienced or witnessed institutionalized racism was a couple of years back. I had the opportunity to work in a large prison complex. It housed only males and had a full hospital unit. I had worked in locked facilities prior to working there and initially had no issues with working there. But after a couple of weeks, it was clear that I was not as prepared as I thought I was. I was not mentally ready to see men, mostly Black men, locked away in cells, living every day behind bars, and all the while knowing that if they happened to be among the few that were awarded parole, more than likely they would not be skilled enough to thrive in a world that had moved well beyond their educational level. Um, and more than likely end up right back in the system, because a lot of these men, anyone that's in prison, are not given skills to keep up with what society needs. And so that was really heartbreaking. Um, which of Erickson's psychosocial stages of development I was in when I experienced the event? I was in the intimacy versus isolation stage of development. I was in a new relationship, enjoyed uh, being a woman, being a single woman, and working in that setting really reminded me of that how vulnerable I was as a woman, and the idea of raising a healthy black male child in America, in the world, is not easy, especially if there are these hidden systems that guide black men to these negative places. Eventually, it just became too emotionally draining for me to continue to work there, and I left after 2 months. The experience taught me two important lessons about myself. One, that my moral compass is fully present, and I always try to perform the least amount of harm in any given situation. Applying CRT, describe one action I can take to challenge power structures that perpetuate racial inequality. I believe by advancing the voice of the marginalized is one of the techniques I choose to use and would continue to choose to use regarding uh, racial inequality. Whenever I have the opportunity to provide support to patients I know are struggling to find medical care and or mental health resources due to past traumas related to race, I try to actively listen to their concerns and provide them with information that they need to be successful. During these exchanges, I also try to remember that although I am a double minority, I'm also often still seen as part of a failing system and part of the problem. I try my best not to make statements made at me in anger personally, which is very easy to do. Um, and I think that acknowledging that these inequalities and inequities exist can be really hard for a lot of people, including myself, to really acknowledge. Um, and if it in any way compromises your income, making decisions like I made to not work in a prison system can be really hard. So I have no regrets for not working at the prison. Kudos to anyone who is able to work within that system, because it is not an easy job. It is not an easy setting. It is not an easy place to be mentally. Um, and that is my critical race theory presentation. Thank you.